Dune Sisterhood. For a long time, we didn't even know what the Dune TV series was going to be called, but now we have a name, we have a director. Again, admittedly, Johan is only going to do the first two episodes, but now we know it is moving forward. For a long time, they said it was happening, it was moving forward, they had scripts ready, they seem to have writers ready to go, and Brian Herbert has tweeted this out a couple times, but where exactly Dune was on television, unclear, but now we're getting a lot more details. It is going to be set thousands and thousands of years before Dune Part 1. So we're not going to meet any familiar faces that we're aware of from the Denis Villeneuve film, and we're getting a whole new cast of characters. And they're saying we're concentrating on a set of Harkonian sisters. The immediate questions and problems are, I think, twofold. Let me deal with, I think, probably the more contentious one, which I guess you would label the political one, that people are going to be very worried that this is going to lean too much towards certain kind of politics. I'm not too worried about that, but I don't think we can ignore that. The gender bending with Liet Kind was kind of a red flag. Are they going to do more things like that? Very different story, different timeline. I don't even see how they could do that, but just when you think it's safe, things like the MCU and DCEU do mess up their continuity by firing and rehiring certain actors. There's not consistency in how people look. Even the sound of voices change. We only have canonically Denise Part 1, and then Part 2 is going to come out soon. It doesn't have to link up directly, but it would be helpful if there's continuity in terms of the canon. And that brings up the second question, which of course, is this a Frank Herbert story? Right? Because again, canonically, depending on how you count it, he only did really 4 main novels. That to me is the canonical Dune saga. Yes, he wrote more about this, but the main story with Paul, his children, and the effects of their rule on the galaxy are those main 4 novels, and they're pretty big onto themselves, except for Dune Messiah, which is much smaller. And we have a lot of interesting characters, and there's much more world building with the Guild, with the Bene Gesserit, and some other players, like the face dancers, which I found really intriguing. Although the face dancers are very problematic, of course, and the goal is things like that. They're not saying yet officially this is adapting Brian Herbert. Brian Herbert is a producer on this, and yes, he was a producer on Denis Part 1, but that was basically the Denis show. I'm sure the producers had a lot of input. That was Denis' vision, and they helped to refine that vision, and that's about it. But we don't know here, is this really the Frank Herbert universe, or are they adapting the Brian Herbert universe? There's no need for conflict. I'm sure a lot of people like both. But I have to speak up for the Frank Herbert purists who would say that those stories are nice. I have no issue with the stories in principle, but the official canon is really just the Frank Herbert stories. This is more like an interesting, expanded universe. I don't need to read. I can read it, but I don't have to, and if I don't want to, I shouldn't. And we can't ignore that for a long time. If you are a diehard fan, you know that what Brian Herbert did doesn't completely line up with what Frank Herbert did. Some of it's small, some of it is big. With the Bene Gesserit, though, it is somewhat problematic and alarming because the Bene Gesserit, as presented in Dune Part 1, as well as the books, yes, they're very powerful. Yes, they can do a lot of things, but they do have limited powers. Whereas it appears with the Brian Herbert stories, there's no nice way to get around this. They do feel a lot like the Jedi. They do seem to have much more expanded powers. They seem to be able to use psychic abilities much more easily. I understand why they did that, right? To make things more action-filled, but it did pull the Dune universe a lot closer to Star Wars. And to some degree, again, it's hard to criticize. Again, Dune has never been as popular or as big or as financially successful as Star Wars. Again, Brian Herbert legally could do whatever he wants. I understand cashing in. I understand. Again, the financial pressure was enormous. But those novels and stories are problematic in terms of the canon. But we don't know yet how much they're taking from Brian Herbert. But I don't think we can ignore they're going to integrate parts of that into this story, into the series. I guess I can just hold out the hope that they're going to find a happy medium between the Brian Herbert universe and the Frank Herbert universe and try to keep as much continuity with canon as possible, not contradict itself too much, and keep mainly to the Frank Herbert mythology and only here and there tweak it. But that's me. But there are a lot of reassuring signs here. They've got a competent showrunner, they've got a very good director, So at least initially, I think the episodes will be very impressive. But going down the road, I do foresee a lot of problems, and I do foresee the fandom is probably going to split up. I can only hope it's going to be a civil bunch of conflicts and not turn into the Star Wars fandom, which is, well, frankly, really, really alarmed. I can hope that, but there we are. So some good news, but I am sure there is going to be trouble ahead soon enough.